A nursing student had to drop out of school because she was compelled to be present in court for days at a time by Municipal Court Judge Angela Stokes in Cleveland. It's one of dozens and dozens of cases of people who have very serious complaints about the way justice is handled in Angela Stokes' courtroom. Injustice at the Justice Center, that's what we're here to talk about today on The Opinion Show, where we get together with members of the editorial board of the Plain Dealer and the Northeast Ohio Media Group. I'm here with Betsy Sullivan, the Director of Opinion and head of the editorial board, and editorial writers Sharon Broussard, Chris Evans, and Pete Krouse. Sharon, why don't you take us to the status of things today with Angela Stokes? This has been a 10-year legacy, really, but what's happened recently to put her back into the news? Okay.
Most recently, the Supreme Court's disciplinary panel has asked that she receive an immediate interim suspension from the state Supreme Court because she's fighting to get back her criminal cases, which she is not allowed to have right now. Judge Ronald Adrien put out an administrative order that forbade her from having those cases because of her dysfunction in the courtroom, rudeness, arbitrary and unusual punishments and, over the years. And so the latest thing was that they want the Supreme Court to act because the Supreme Court's Board of Grievance commissioners, have not done anything, and they've been sitting on this for more than a year.
For over a year.
Yeah.
And now she's in court, right? I mean, she's trying to get her criminal docket back.
She's trying to.
Yeah,
but let's talk a little bit about the kind of abuses we're talking about. She's gone through dozens and dozens of bailiffs.
35.
She mistreats them.
25.
Complains about how they smell or how they talk. I mean, just arbitrary things where no one wants to work with her. Defense lawyers have lost huge amounts of money because they're called into court at a certain time and the whole day will go by without them appearing. She's actually ordered pre-sentence testing after she sentenced people, exhausting the court's budget. And these complaints about her behavior go back a long, long way. I mean, it's not like this is something that very recently came up. I know at the Plain Dealer, we were writing stories about this a long time ago. Paul Orlowski has been doing pieces at Channel 19 about this for years and years and years, and yet it continues. And they're the kinds of cases that I don't think you can dispute that wrong things are happening to people. If you're in her courtroom for a traffic ticket and all of a sudden you're in a holding cell because she doesn't like the way you're talking,
or your cell phone rings,
or you make any noise at all that she thinks is toward her, or disruptive. Right. I think the real issue hit for Judge Adrien when the Cuyahoga County Public Defender's Office said he was going to pull all their criminal cases out of her court. Yeah. And I guess they'd be dispersed elsewhere, but this court is losing credibility by the minute every time she's on it, and she's been on it way too long.
So it talks to the power of the name game, though. I mean, geez.
As an editorial board, we've called for her to step down a number of times. When she last ran for re-election, we were shocked that her two opponents were people who were running against her because of how they've been treated in her courtroom. She currently does not have a bailiff, according to this latest complaint. But more importantly, more significantly to me, she has violated people's constitutional rights. This has been emphasized by the disciplinary counsel in his latest request to the Supreme Court to step in directly and act. And yet, I find it shocking, and this is something we emphasized in our editorial today, that posted online yesterday and is in the paper today, that she, despite that the Board of Commissioners has not acted on the complaint.
Well,
allowing her to kind of, stick, the camel's nose back in the tent of trying to get her criminal docket restored.
And that's what kind of is surprising here. I mean, what's been described about her really gets at the idea of mental health. And so if she has steadfastly refused to step down and run for re-election, isn't it the Supreme Court's responsibility to make sure that justice is served and people get their constitutional rights? And yet, for years, they haven't. Why not? Why can't the Supreme Court take care of something like
Maybe it has something to do with the fact that she is an elected municipal court judge as opposed to an appointed judge. I mean, elected officials are probably afforded more discretion because they are elected. And I'm just saying that maybe that's part of it, but I would agree with you. The Supreme Court, I think that committee has been looking at this for over a year. Why they haven't been able to come to a conclusion by now is beyond me. She can't have criminal cases right now, but she still has civil cases. What attorney, what individual would want to go into her court even for a civil case? The Supreme Court has to just take this act now.
And
basically.
I've wondered whether it isn't because she's a Stokes, that they're unwilling
Right.
but it is simply just inconceivable to me that they would allow her to continue in office given her past abuses. I mean, really, the disciplinary counsel's latest complaint is 335 pages long. If you read any of the specifics about, and you mentioned the nurse who lost her job.
It's like a Kafka novel.
But she would throw people into jail who weren't even defendants because their cell phones rang. She would.
Or they talked.
One
They opened the
woman,
door too hard.
she'd already been sentenced and she needed to pay her fine and said she needed to wait for her disability check.
Right.
And Judge Stokes is saying, well, what's your disability? Which is really not an appropriate question. And when the woman said she was schizophrenic, she actually ordered her detained for psychological review, even though it had nothing,
apropos
the
of
case had
nothing.
already been resolved. I mean,
Yeah.
Right. So
But I think, as Betsy touched on, I think part of it is the name. I mean, she's the daughter of Lou Stokes. And, I mean, why does it take, when did it go to the disciplinary? It was like in September, October of 2013.
Yeah.
What have they been doing?
I don't know.
Well,
The
you know,
interesting part is that the probable cause panel of that disciplinary panel has said that there's probable cause for everything that was in the 49-page report. That's even before they got to the 335-page report recently. So it's like a black box, and you don't really know what's going on, what they're thinking, and how they could allow the course of justice to run so wrong through that courtroom.
and Angela Stokes did respond to the original complaint with her own responses, which the disciplinary counsel said, after looking at, deny, that she is in denial about the extent of her issues.
Right.
And this is something that both Judge Adrian and Judge Larry Jones, who was the administrative judge prior to Adrian, both have counseled her. She refuses to change. So
Yeah.
I mean, I really, and this is a case where the Ohio Supreme Court really has to step in and make sure that a judge who is abusing her position is not allowed to continue in that.
But it makes you wonder, though, if it takes this kind of time and effort to discipline or question Judge Stokes' ability, how many other judges out there who maybe don't rise to her level of incompetence, let's say, but are pretty bad off, and they're not even being addressed.
There isn't another judge, though, with this level of complaint. She has been making jaws drop for a decade. I mean, we're talking about an investigation that's a year old, but everybody in the court has known for many years how injustice is being meted out in her courtroom and stood by, which you could argue makes them a party to that injustice. It's very hard to acknowledge in this year that you can have people go into a courtroom for traffic cases and things like that and have their lives wrecked. I mean, a nursing student that has to drop out of school because Angela Stokes has her sit for 8 hours day after day. That just should never happen.
But she's also, Chris, I mean, it's not even people who are appearing before her, but like family or relatives who come into her courtroom and the door closes too loudly, and so she'll say something to them.
Well, she also makes them say who they are. I mean, courts are supposed to be open to the public. She makes people come in and identify themselves before they're allowed to sit down.
Right. And God forbid if you have a conversation in the courtroom and she hears that, that leads to more trouble.
That leads to going to home.
It does kind of make you wonder about then, like, what's the check and balance on a judge that is not well, is what I would say. Apparently, it seems like there is no check and balance, and that's pretty frightening.
Right.
And even when you try to impose check and balances and you've got substantial evidence, here we are a year and change down the
Still talking
road
about it.
and nothing.
Yeah.
And she's
So
still
this
hearing
is-
civil cases.
So the process is flawed. I mean, it's many different, you go from the disciplinary panel apparently to the Board of Commissioners, and, you know, you would think that things would be moving, but just because all these things have highfalutin names and they're very long, in the end, no action is being taken, and feet are just dragging across the floor.
Well, check me on this. Is there a single person that's involved in this that is defending her? Or has everybody that's reviewed this come to the same conclusion that she should not be sitting as a judge?
Everyone probably except for her lawyer, and she does have a lawyer. So, but yes, everyone has. I mean, I think when you have two administrative judges who, you know, would bend over backwards, you know, to help a new judge way back when she was a new judge get her footing, you know, when you see them speak out against a colleague, which I'm sure they never ever want to be in the position to do, but they felt that they had to because, you know, lives are being ruined, that says a lot right there. I think even before it got to the disciplinary panel.
Right.
Well,
Well, and lives are being
we-
ruined, but also the credibility of Muni
Right,
Court
right.
is being damaged.
And that's something we mentioned in the editorial that we just did, is the potential disruption to the court if she does get her criminal docket back because of the way in which she abused and exhausted court resources. She was, because she can't seem to manage her docket, her courtroom was going way into the evening, which was disruptive. So then, you know, Judge Adrian adopted an administrative order that said that everyone has to end by 5.
She came up with a creative one.
Then she would continue
Yeah,
everything
maneuver.
till the next morning. So these people, this is one of the reasons, you know, that people were losing their jobs and their, you know, place in school because they would have to come back the next day.
And she would tell lawyers, I want you in my courtroom immediately. They'd get there immediately and then sit for hours while she processed paperwork.
When is she
And
up
she
for
also-
reelection?
Oh, it was in the story. 2017, 2018?
So she was last elected when?
It's 2012. She was
Yeah.
the last elected,
Yeah.
so it must be 2018.
And all of this was known to the public in 2012?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And had been known.
But she had
Unfortunately.
some very qualified opponents who, as
That's
Betsy
right.
said, ran
wasn't.
just because they thought that it was bad for the court for her to be a sitting
And
judge.
we endorsed somebody other than her. But,
Wow.
you know, one of the things that I was really offended by, and unfortunately, I don't think she's the only judge who does this, because I used to see this when I would go out to like mayor's courts in the suburb, but those judges who really penalize defendants who try to represent themselves. And this
was very
was
harsh.
cited repeatedly in these documents, that if you were pro se, meaning representing yourself, she would yell at you. Sometimes she would order you to have psychological counseling. She would repeatedly postpone your ability to have, you know, your time in court. She would force you to have counsel when you did not want it. I mean, you know, and in one case, the kind of guy stood up for himself and said, no, I want to represent myself. She pushed his case off so long that the charges against him had to be dropped on speedy, you know, on speedy trial grounds.
Yeah.
So
There's one
there-
satisfied customer.
Yeah, but maybe the public wasn't satisfied in that case, or the
Right.
police who arrested this guy.
Right. But anyway, but going back, you know, a decade or so, I mean, where she originally, as I remember, it came to the public's attention, was when she would get off the bench and pray with people.
Yes.
Yeah. that
You know,
was one of
I
the
mean,
things.
it was unimaginable, you know, separation of church and state. It was like, and she would get off the bench and sit down and pray.
Before we close, I should disclose, I don't think anybody else up here can say this, I was actually in her courtroom as a defendant after getting a ticket in the year 2000. The officer didn't show up and my case was dismissed without any action.
But
other
you
than
still
that.
went to jail.
I was in her courtroom for a while. If you've had any experience with Judge Stokes, we'd like to hear it. Please leave your thoughts in the comments where you see this show. This is The Opinion Show. We'll see you next time.